Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets powered by FTN. I'm your host, Chris Meaney. You're watching right here on Game Plus Network. Thanks as always for taking the time to hang out. If you're hanging out here during the stream, well, if you have any questions, don't be afraid to hit me up at Chris Meaney. Of course, we are going to talk a little golf here today with my guy, Matt Jones from FTN. He is the host of Bogey Free. You can use the promo code Bogey Free and you can get yourself a little bit of a discount, whether it's FTN Bets, FTN Daily, or FTN Fantasy. We're going to talk about the Northern Trust here happening this weekend. It's the first event, the playoff event here of the FedEx Cup. So I want to get some picks, some bets, what he's thinking, and Matt is a big football guy as well. He's got great content over at ftnfantasy.com, and he's been doing this really cool segment, Fantasy Football Multiverse, looking at every single team, and he just touched on the Raiders, so I want to get his thoughts on the Raiders and this series that he's been pumping out over at ftnfantasy.com. I want to get a few targets and a few fades from him as well. So Matt is hanging by. We're going to talk a little golf and a little fantasy football here on Mean Streets, and I took part in a flex draft yesterday, thanks to Jake Seeley and the flex drafts. We've been talking about them as they go. I think there's one more. Jake had the big event in New York just last weekend, and we touched on his draft on his show, All In Football, over at Bets TV. And I took part in the Superflex. I drafted from the 12th spot. My team's okay. Don't love it. Sometimes I leave drafts where I love my squad. Sometimes I leave them where I don't like them at all. I'm in between this one here, but I wanted to just go through just not so much my squad, just a lot of sharp minds in the draft for sure, but also just where did Michael Thomas go? Chase Claypool went down with an injury yesterday. Where did he go? And he fell just a little bit. I think people were a little uneasy with Chase Claypool going down, not having any results. More on that in a little bit. But just want to touch on some of my takeaways from the Superflex draft, where quarterbacks went and where the running backs fell as well. So we'll talk about a strategy that you can take when you're drafting in a Superflex draft. And we did one yesterday at FTN as well, a Superflex with 6-point passing for quarterbacks. I didn't make the rules. I'm not against it, but super flex and 6-point passing, yeah, quarterbacks absolutely fly off the board in those drafts. But first, as always, a couple news items here to kick us off before we get into some baseball and some golf as well as football with Matt Jones. The biggest thing was Chase Claypool. We don't have any news yet on how significant the injury is, but reports out of Pittsburgh is that it's not that significant and that he, quote, should be fine dealing with a minor ankle sprain. So he went down yesterday. The entire Twitter world, of course, the big, oh no, what's going to happen with Chase Claypool? We all like this guy. He had a great rookie season last year. He was getting drafted as a top 25 wide receiver on average. Is he okay? And we can all breathe a sigh of relief. It does sound like Chase Claypool will indeed be okay. If he wasn't, it would be good news for Juju Smith-Schuster. 3 wide receivers there, but Juju playing in the slot, not the deep threat guy in the offense. I don't think his role would change, but maybe a few more targets for him if Chase Claypool did indeed miss some time, but it looks like he is going to be okay. The other big news that came down late last night and then early this morning, Matt Nagy commenting on it, is Justin Fields dealing with a groin injury. Nagy says they're going to treat Fields, just really going to be cautious with him. And I think the quote was, I got to hear, we want to be smart. It doesn't make sense right now to push the limits and take a chance on making it more sore. So he was the big talking point from week 1 in the preseason. Justin Fields, who's awesome, right? His ability was on full display, especially in the third quarter on that first drive. He showed poise in the pocket. He scrambled. He capped off a nice drive with an 8-yard rushing touchdown. He showed accuracy on his throws. And, I mean, the upside, again, was on full display. He's going to be starting before you know it. But this is a bit of a setback here. Nagy said yesterday he wanted to give more reps to Andy Dalton. And we said on this show yesterday with producer Tino that if Andy Dalton struggled at times in that preseason game with more reps, that would just be better news or good news for Justin Fields to close the gap. And maybe we can think about him being a week 1 starter for the Chicago Bears. But now we got to see how this plays out. I don't think we'll see him at all in this preseason game this week. So it's going to be a big game for Andy Dalton just to, not to really prove. I think everybody knows what Andy Dalton has to offer. And certainly the Chicago Bears probably have an idea as well. But he didn't look good at times with Dallas last year. So he needs to have a strong showing this weekend just for his sake to be able to say, listen, I'm in this competition as well. Everybody loves Justin Fields. Chicago traded up to get this guy. I'm still here. I have a chance to be the week 1 starter. We'll see how it plays out this weekend. More Chicago news as well. Tevin Jenkins, offensive tackle, undergoing back surgery today. The goal is to get him back this season, according to Nagy. Switching over to the Dallas Cowboys, Hard Knocks episode 2 aired last night. I did not see it. I see the buzz on CeeDee Lamb, and I think we all joked about it on this show, is that soon as Hard Knocks starts, everyone's going to start talking about CeeDee Lamb, but a lot of people were talking about CeeDee Lamb anyways as a wide receiver moving up to, the ADP right now is 11, but he has jumped week in and week out. And we'll touch tomorrow on some of the risers and fallers on this show over the past week in high stakes leagues. But CeeDee Lamb has continued to rise one spot here and there, and I'm seeing people have him inside the top 10 among wide receivers. Listen, he was my favorite wide receiver out of the draft last year. I have high expectations for him. I think he's going to be a stud. But the news here is not related to him. It's the other wide receiver on that team, not Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper, who's been dealing with an ankle injury, feeling a whole lot better, and hopes to play this Saturday. The news not as positive for Dak Prescott, although he will be limited in practice again here today. He does not have a great chance to play this Saturday against the Texans. The exact quote from McCarthy: probably won't suit up. There's a good chance he probably won't suit up. That from McCarthy. Other news items here that kind of took me back and may take you back a little bit as well. The Saints are bringing in Kevin White. Remember Kevin White? That's right. Bringing in Kevin White. This guy must just be amazing in practice, in like not even just OTAs, just when you bring in a guy just to see what they have to offer. He must just ball out because he's just jumped around over the past couple of years. It's maybe just a depth guy and not teams not giving up full hope on Kevin White. But once upon a time, a top pick of the Chicago Bears and really just hasn't done anything in the NFL. And Josh Rosen popped up yesterday. The 49ers waived Rosen. Not going to lie, did not know he was part of that squad. The Eagles waived Kerryon Johnson. And then another guy here that you may remember from years ago, a top prospect, Josh Doxson. Josh Doxson. Arizona bringing in Josh Doxson. Don't know why. Maybe just a depth piece. Who knows? Can't have too many wide receivers, but AJ Green on that squad. Of course, DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk, and new prize, Rondale Moore, who's looked good. He looked really good in week 1 of the preseason. I thought they did a great job of just getting him the ball, and I think that was the game plan, right? We got a young rookie wide receiver here. There's no Hopkins. There's no AJ. Christian Kirk probably has the role inside the slot. We know that he can play on the outside. Let's move him to the outside in this game, and let's get the ball to Moore and see what he has to offer. He was targeted a couple times. He had 2 carries for 16 yards. He was involved in the offense. And I thought, no disrespect to Larry Fitzgerald because he's one of the best wide receivers of all time, the unbelievable hands, and has not yet said is going to officially retire. He's leaving that door open. Weird that the Cardinals are bringing in Josh Doxson, so he's probably closed the door on Arizona. I don't think he'll play, but Larry Fitzgerald getting those 5-yard passes that he just couldn't turn into first downs in the slot. We saw that twice with Rondale Moore over the weekend. He's pretty quick. And then Jamal Adams signs the 4-year, $70 million extension, $38 million guaranteed with Seattle, making him the highest paid safety in the NFL. So that's it for news and notes items. We're going to continue the football talk before we bring in Matt Jones and switch to a little PGA talk. I just want to go over yesterday's results in the flex draft. So don't go anywhere. Mean Streets continues right here on Game Plus Network. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney hanging out with you. Matt Jones is hanging by in a little bit. We're going to talk about the Northern Trust as well as some of his favorite football targets and fades. Mostly running backs here today. He's got a couple running backs for us on either side, fades and targets. Let's get overall his thoughts on his draft strategy heading into this season. We're almost here. We really are. It's Wednesday, August 18th. It really does feel like football is here, and it is draft season. Drafts are really starting to ramp up, and I want to give another shout out to Jake Seeley. Took part in the Super Flex draft yesterday. He does a great job, and give a follow, flex_leagues on Twitter, and of course, All In Kid already. So the Super Flex I picked from the 12 spot. A lot of sharp people in here. A lot of sharp people. My strategy heading in, I thought quarterbacks would fly off the board a little. I picked at the 12 spot, and I thought that Dak and Wilson would be gone. And my mindset was like, okay, listen, I'm just going to get Adams or Kelsey, and I'll probably go with a running back, and then I'll focus on a quarterback, maybe in rounds 3, 4, or 5, 6. And I was thinking to myself that maybe I would get a Joe Burrow, a Kirk Cousins, and that I knew that I was going to try to get either Lance or Fields. I'm big on both. I want one of those quarterbacks in almost every single draft, especially a super flex where I can get a little bit later on, fill it out towards the end of my draft as a quarterback who can maybe play for the first few weeks, and then I could roll out Fields or Lance, assuming that they didn't get the job right away. So, again, as I said earlier, I don't love this team. Looking back, there's a few things that I wish I did differently. And one was probably avoiding Dak Prescott and maybe going with Nick Chubb. I've talked a lot about Nick Chubb on this show, and this is where I think I'm weak. I started with Kelsey, Dak, Henderson, Hopkins, Lance, Javonte Williams, Jamar Chase, Michael Carter, Gallup, Taysom Hill, Will Fuller, Jarvis Landry, Hines, Cole Kmet, Cole Beasley is wide receiver 69. He was a top 30 wide receiver last year. And then the Rams defense. I think, again, I'm get sidetracked here throughout all of this. Maybe I'll see if one of these guys can jump on a show next week and dissect their team. I think we got Stample and Florio coming up here before the NFL season does indeed start. So maybe they can talk about their strategy and team. But I just wanted quickly, before I go through some takeaways, Broncos defense. You see there was a third defense taken here from Brad Evans. And if you look over consensus rankings, wherever it is that you look, and you look at our projections, you look at our rankings, see where everyone has defenses ranked. And not a lot of people are playing with defenses. They're kind of eliminating them. I still like them. But the Broncos have a really good schedule to start. Sorry, Tino. Jets, Giants. I think the Jets are there. I think the Bengals are there. It's a very soft schedule to start. They make for a decent pick. Like, I just stream defenses. I usually don't start with the Rams or the Bucks. I won't have a lot of shares of those defenses. But since I picked in that 12 spot and I started the last round, everybody here is waiting on defense. I think the Bucks were the only ones to go, and I just take the Rams. But, if you're in a draft or redraft and you're just picking a defense late, I think that probably should be the strategy. Just look at matchups and stream the week to week. The Broncos make for a good one, just like the Colts made for a good one last year with the soft schedule, and they're kind of on the rise. And I think the Broncos have a really strong defense. So again, looking at my team here, and I don't want to just go over my team. I want to talk about some other takeaways. I think looking back, there's a couple things. Henderson, I'm pretty thin at RB. Henderson really needs to pan out for me to be a borderline low-end RB1. I don't know if he has that kind of upside, but at that point, RB18, I'd like them more than Miles Sanders. DeAndre Swift is actually a pretty solid pick at RB21, but I'm just off of DeAndre Swift, Josh Jacobs, Mike Davis. I'm not totally into those guys. I do like Davis. This is a half-point setting. I'd like him a little bit more in a full-point setting. So Henderson there. They haven't brought anybody in yet in the Rams organization. I think they feel confident that he could be the guy for them. Remember Sean McVay? I believe it was his first pick, maybe his second pick as a member of the Rams. He takes him in the second round, just like Cam Akers was taken in the second round last year, and Akers unfortunately not going to be around this year. So I look at the both backs and Akers being gone, and last year Akers having more carries, more attempts than Henderson, but Henderson having more yards overall, finishing with more red zone touches, and right there in terms of just elusive rating and tackles avoided, things like that. And again, he had fewer carries. So I think he's going to be a big part of the offense as a borderline bell cow back. I think he can catch a few balls out of the backfield as well. And that's why I think a lot of people liked him as a late round target when Akers was healthy, is that this could be a guy who could fall into some catches in the third in a third down role and still get some opportunity in the red zone. Again, where I would like to change things here is maybe avoiding Dak, although I do like Dak and I think he's going to be fine. He does have certainly top five upside at the quarterback position, is where maybe I go Chubb there. And on the way back, I could take a Joe Burrow. I could still think about a Henderson, or I could go wide receiver, or double up on a running back. And then, it would just make my running backs, I think, a little bit stronger. So Henderson, Williams, Carter, two rookies in there. Hines catching balls out of the backfield. So I think Williams is lock and loaded. He's going to be fine this year. I'm not too worried about Melvin Gordon, but Carter could take some time for him. It could be like a week 6, week 7 thing where he takes over that backfield. How great is this offense going to be? Can they move the football? The offensive line, I think, is going to be strong. It should be decent. I'd say it's at least a top 10 offensive line with some of the additions. But a rookie quarterback there, a new coaching staff that's very familiar with Kevin Coleman that he brought in. I'm not crazy about Coleman, but he probably does get first down reps to start the season. Let's see if he can stay healthy. And then I think where else I went here, I don't have a lot of shares of Chase, but I did like this pick. I was really hoping that Judy would fall to me. Talked a lot about Judy on the show yesterday with producer Tino, who's a big fan of Judy as well. He goes as wide receiver 24, and then Higgins goes as 25. I would have taken Higgins over Chase. Brad takes him. I take Chase. And then where I completely went off the rails, and I thought a lot about this last night. And I'm always just taken back that Jake lets me in this draft with all these sharp minds, and I want to do well, so I get stressed, and I just want to have good picks. So looking back at it last night, I was bummed because in my rankings I have Corey Davis, Marvin Jones, and Darnell Mooney all ranked ahead of Michael Gallup. Yet I picked Gallup as wide receiver 43. Now, a lot of upside, but he's like the 3 or maybe the 4 or potentially the 5 in that offense if you include Blake Jarwin and Zeke catching balls out of the backfield. Now, I'd like that Gallup was playing out of the slot. I like that role for him. It could mean maybe more targets, more catches for him. But also, again, the third option, I think I got caught up in just all the best ball drafts and stacking and Dak and Gallup. It's not a strategy I like to take. It's okay. If they hook up for a lot of touchdowns, I'll certainly benefit from it. But I was looking back and I was like, man, how did I pick Gallup over Marvin Jones, Darnell Mooney, and Corey Davis as guys in Jones and Davis who could be the ones on their team as opposed to maybe the 3 or 4 for Gallup. But I think this team will be okay. My thinking with Taysom Hill is that he will start. I do believe that he will start for the Saints in the first couple of weeks, and it could be a clouded situation to just hopefully by the time Sean Payton says, listen, I'm going to go with Jameis Winston here, that Trey Lance is the starting quarterback. And I thought that I could get Jimmy Garoppolo with like my last pick and just roll out Jimmy G until Lance, but Brad Evans jumped all over that. A couple things here. So Michael Thomas, if you're just wondering about Michael Thomas, where he went wide receiver 35. So that's kind of where he has fallen here. We've been talking about him every Thursday or so, taking a look at high stakes leagues, the risers and the fallers. Where has Michael Thomas settled here in drafts? And the consensus is right around wide receiver 37 I have over the past 2 weeks in NFFC drafts, but wide receiver 35 here. So right in the range of, let's just rattle them off. Odell Beckham, wide receiver 29. Kenny Golladay was 28. Claypool 30. So Claypool again fell a little bit. Some concerns. I was thinking about him in the chase spot, and if he was 100% healthy, I'd probably go with him. I just didn't know. We just didn't know. I didn't want to take that risk. But Claypool, wide receiver 30, as Florio's 4th wide receiver, pretty money, buddy. Samuel after that, Juju 32, Boyd 33, Sutton 34, and then Michael Thomas 35, Antonio Brown, Russell Gage after that, and then DJ Chark and Mike Williams to fall there as well. But again, I think the biggest takeaway here is just I wanted to just address the first 2 rounds and give you a feel of a super flex draft and how these quarterbacks really do fall off the board. Mahomes, 1. Kyler Murray in the 6th spot, Josh Allen in the 7th spot, Lamar Jackson in the 9th spot. So that's 4 quarterbacks in the first round. And then you got Prescott, Rodgers, Wilson, Herbert, Tannehill, and Hurts. So 10 quarterbacks in the first 2 rounds of the draft. If you do indeed avoid the quarterback position in the first 3 rounds, I mean, you're looking at a Kirk Cousins, a Matt Ryan, a Tua, a Lawrence as your QB1, and you're thinking about them in the 4th or the 5th round. So I think it's important to address the quarterback position in the first 2 rounds, whether it's 1 pick. And again, if I didn't do that with Dak in the 2nd round and I went Chubb, and then I go Henderson or Carson or something like that, I probably end up with Burrow, a Lance or Fields, a Daniel Jones. I don't love it as much. So sitting here thinking that I probably should have went another way with Dak, but I think it could potentially work out as well. I don't know if I broke down this draft all that well. Travis Etienne, RB27, I think was a decent value. James Conner, RB41, I think was a decent value. A.J. Dillon around RB39, I think is a strong value. Devontae Parker, wide receiver 51, I think is a strong value as well. But we'll get somebody on this show to address all of this. Where did Gaskin go? Malcolm Brown went pretty late here. Let's do this on the fly. I should have known this. Gaskin goes as RB 32 to Derek Van Riper. Pretty good value, right? Sometimes we can overreact over preseason stuff. It's pretty good value for a guy who's going around RB 24 just a week and a half ago. So I think that was a solid pick there as well. All right, that's it. Let's bring in Matt Jones. We're going to talk a little golf and get some of his targets and maybe his strategy when it comes to a super flex draft. So don't go anywhere. Mean Streets continues right here on Game Plus Network. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney bringing in our guy, Matt Jones of FTN, Matt Jones TFR. He is the host of Bogey Free, which he recorded yesterday. Go back and watch that. Hopefully get a couple little secrets from that episode and how Matt is feeling about this weekend, the Northern Trust, the first playoff event at the FedEx Cup. Matt, welcome, man. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited. This is a big week for me because it's tournaments in sort of my backyard-ish. I'm going with my dad on Friday, so I'm pretty pumped up.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, Liberty. You been before?
I haven't been there yet. No, we've gone to the Northern Trust a few times. It's usually around here, but haven't been to that course just yet.
So what do you make of like this event, I know, you got the four majors and other tournaments that, the players and things that are very competitive and strong fields, but like this is the best of the best. Like, am I crazy to think that this is maybe the toughest tournament of the year to win?
No, I don't think that's crazy at all. I think Nosferatu, who does a lot of the official World Golf Ranking stuff on Twitter, he said that this is the strongest non-major field in his database this week. Um, so yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. You have the top 124 because Louis Oosthuizen withdrew
Yes.
in typical Louis fashion. But yeah, like it's an extremely difficult tournament to win, and we kind of see the cream rise to the top in this tournament a lot. Like just thinking about winners over the past few years, it's usually guys way up at the tippy top. So yeah.
So before we get into some of your favorite picks and stuff like that, are you looking at any certain statistics here? Like, is there anything that catches your eye? I mean, it is the best of the best, and Rom is coming in red hot, and we'll get into him in a little bit. But is there anything like from a statistic standpoint that you're looking at, whether it's DFS or just betting of guys that kind of have like their form and their game kind of is this course takes to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably of a different mindset than a lot of the guys that you hear talk about golf. I don't spend a ton of time going into very granular, specific like which category of strokes gained, which greens and regulation.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of take it all in and come up with my power ranking score. And if you're familiar with like Massey Peabody or ESPN, like the what is it, FPI?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I have a rating where it's like how good a golfer is compared to an average golfer on tour. And it's just strokes. It's just strokes per round. So that's kind of how I look at things. And like you just mentioned, Rom is um, just just absurdly absurdly far and ahead of everybody else at the moment. So I'm having a hard time. I'm not usually a 10-1 better in golf outrights, but he's tempting me this week.
Yeah, no kidding. So yeah, you got your PGA DFS volatility report over at FTN Daily or FTNFantasy.com. But if you use bogey free, you are going to save yourself a bit of a discount, whether it's FTN Bets, FTN Fantasy, and FTN Daily. So let's get into ROM and the rest here up at the top of the board. It is ROM 8-1. I'm using some odds here from DraftKings.
Yeah.
Spieth 12-1. DJ, I think DJ feels like he's starting to come around just a little bit. I don't know. It's been a rough go for him. 16-1, Morikawa 16-1, Xander 18-1, McIlroy 22-1, Koepka 22 as well, Bryson 25, Justin Thomas 25, and Answer at 21. So yeah, Rom up at the top of the board. And I know you following your work and a lot of people, same sort of deal, don't love to bet at the top of the board here, but you can go back years ago when Tiger was always at the top of the board. If you were just baiting him, you weren't winning any cash. But Rahm's coming in. Man, what a season for him. Talk to me about John Rahm and just how good he's been.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at his last five starts, right? He's uh, T3, seventh place, won the U.S. Open. He had to withdraw because of the COVID test, but he was 6 strokes ahead of the Memorial. Which, speaking of strong fields, like the Memorial is also
Yes.
a very strong field. And then he was T8 before that. Like he he's just been he's just been on a completely different level. It's sort of um, like he's finally reached the level that we all kind of saw in him, and he's still a young guy. Like I think people were pretty hard on him to start his career, but he's been insane lately. My simulator makes him plus 920. I know DraftKings is a little bit lower at 8-1, but there are some 10-1s still floating out there. I think on Bet365 and a few other places. So um, not a huge chunk of value, but I think you could like feel pretty comfortable doing that or a top five, just to get a little bit of exposure to him because I tweeted it out earlier in the week, but with that power ranking I was talking about, the gap from him to Colin Morikawa, who's number 2 in my power ranking, is the same as the gap from Morikawa to the 27th ranked golfer in the field this week.
Wow.
So, and I've never seen anything like even remotely close to that. So, I'm definitely going to have plenty of exposure to him in a few
I was,
different ways this week.
I was just going to ask you if you've seen a gap that large, and you just answered it. Wow, that's crazy. And again, yeah, use the free over at ftnbets.com. We have the free prop shop. You can get the best possible odds out there. I did see Rory at 25-1 in certain spots, but yeah, 22-1 here. Let's dig a little bit deeper into maybe some longer odds. Is there any others that really stand out to you?
Yeah, a couple of guys that I'm sort of looking to get exposure to on my card rather than in DFS because they're going to be pretty high owned would be Webb Simpson and Harris English. Um, Webb Simpson, there's some 40-1s out there, and I make him 33-1, so pretty decent chunk of value there. Um, and like his last three tournaments, he's been in the top 20 each time, so definitely coming in with good form. He's sort of been like I feel like a little forgotten this year. 2 years ago, he was just at the top of everything, competing every week in contention. Um, he's been a little up and down, but it seems like he's sort of rounding into form at the right time right now. So, Webb is sort of a guy that doesn't do any one particular thing incredibly, but it just has that all around game where he can, even if he's sort of not as sharp on approach, he can make up for it on the greens and things like that. So he's one of the least tilting golfers to bet, in my opinion.
Who's the most tilting golfer for you?
Oh gosh, I mean, I never get Spieth right. Whether I'm picking him or fading him, I'm always playing whack a mole with Spieth. I think he's probably cost me more money than anybody else.
I thought he had a pretty good year. A nice bounce back. I think a lot of people were counting him out. It's been a roller coaster ride though, so I get that, right? Spieth, like the next best thing years ago when he was a rookie and he was winning tournaments, and then a couple of years ago in the Masters, I was in on him on the Masters when he had
Yeah.
that meltdown. So I'm assuming you were as well, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with him is like he still has that like blow up round in him even when he's in contention. Like he could end up finishing like T3 and he could still have like a 76 during his week. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
so those are the times where I'm like, "Oh, like he's clicking this week. I'm going to bet him in a head to head for round 2," and then he goes out and shoots like 75.
So I'd like to hear that you were in on Webb Simpson. He does seem to be consistent, usually there on the weekend and making things happen on Sundays. So I was happy that when I asked you for some players, I'd already bet him. So I was like, nice. I like that as well. And then another guy that you had, Harris English at 40-1. Talk to me about him.
Yeah, sort of the same deal. He's 10th in the world right now. I think if you, uh, you know, texted your group chat who are the biggest sports fans, I don't think that many people would know too much about him. But he's been playing great. He won the Travelers. A few weeks ago he has 2 wins on the season. Um, so he's a guy again that's I mean I'm looking at Kyle Murray's ownership projections here. He's definitely going to be chalky as far as DFS is concerned, but for betting, we don't care about that. So I make him about 22-1 to win, and you can find him at 40-1 in some places. Yeah, pretty much across the board. I'm showing value on him from my simulator, so he's a guy that I'm definitely in on this week.
On the way out, before we switch gears and we talk a little football with you, you mentioned DFS. Is there an underrated a guy that's not jockey that you think that you'll have in a lot of your lineups?
My usual strategy, especially up at the top, is just going with whoever's lowest owned, regardless of how I feel about them, because just game theory wise, that's shown to be a pretty profitable thing. And Xander Schauffele this week is projected for single digit ownership, and he just won a gold medal. Like he's playing pretty well, so seems a little silly to me.
Surprised to hear that, actually. Out of all the players that you would have set up at the top, I wouldn't imagine that he would have single digit ownership. Yeah, he's playing pretty well. There's no question about that. Matt, we'll switch gears, man. Not only are you sharp when it comes to football or golf, football as well, but just check out everything that we have over at FTN, get you set up for the tournament, whether it's a betting standpoint, maybe your pools, you're still hanging around in one and dones, and just a DFS as well. Check out Bogey Free. Use that promo code Bogey Free for a discount over at FTNBets.com, FTNDaily.com, and FTNFantasy.com. Matt has a lot of great content over at FTN right now when it comes to golf and football. Something you're doing pretty cool, man. The football multiverse. I like this. We'll get into that. We'll talk about a couple of your targets and a couple fades. Don't go anywhere. Mean Streets continues right here on Game Plus Network. Watching Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney with Matt Jones. You can give him a follow on Twitter, Matt Jones, TFR. We just talked a little Northern Trust. We're going to switch gears and talk a little fantasy football. Matt, a very sharp football mind as well. We've been doing a lot of best ball drafts. I think we did one together a couple weeks ago. We did one on this show yesterday, and we talked about Josh Jacobs, and something that you're doing over at FTN Fantasy is this fantasy football multiverse. I think it's super cool. You're breaking down every single team and just like, what if Kenyon Drake, who the Raiders brought in, catches balls into the backfield like he's always done? What if he gets some goal line carries and some opportunity? What if he cuts in, which I think we can all assume is going to happen, into Josh Jacobs' workload? So talk to me about this series and talk to me about Josh Jacobs. Are you in or are you out on JJ?
Yeah, so the multiverse, taking a page from Marvel, I started this series a couple years ago back at RotoViz, and now brought it over to FTN. It's just sort of, we sort of get anchored to these projections, right? Like, we see this is what this guy is projected for, and maybe it's his median outcome, maybe it's his top end, maybe it's his floor. It's sort of, it's sort of ambiguous, like, depending on who you're talking to. Some guys will project for upside, some guys will project for their floor. So this is just a way for me to sort of look through a team and say, okay, this is what the team looks like from an ADP standpoint. Like, is the quarterback being highly drafted with 2 pass catchers, and the running back is being drafted lower? Then I know it's, a more concentrated pass offense, things like that. So as far as Jacobs goes, he has so many things going against him that I'm definitely out on him. He is, his RB2 teammate is being drafted very close to him, which I've wrote about a bunch, and I have a running back dead zone piece coming out on Sunday that addresses this as well. When we're not sure as a community on who should definitely be drafted first, we're pretty bad at picking who is actually first. Like, it's just that simple. Like, when a running back is drafted within 3 rounds of his RB2 teammate, he only finishes as the RB1 on his team like 40% of the time, which is pretty crazy. On top of that, he's firmly in the running back dead zone, which I call sort of rounds like 4 to 9. Um,
Mhm.
and so when you're drafting running backs in that portion of the draft, you're sacrificing in best ball, you're sacrificing just like an average win rate, but you're also not giving yourself really a chance uh, at these wide receivers that are going in the same range that are much safer bets typically. Um, so yeah, all of those things are just sort of going against him from an ADP standpoint. And then you throw in Drake, like you said, who's a pass catching back. He's had 5+ targets in a third of his games in his NFL career, and Jacobs has 3 games where he's seen 5+ targets. So like it's not the right profile to emerge from the dead zone and be like one of those hits where the robust RB guys are like, see, I told you it's fine to go RB times 5. Like he's just not that guy.
And for Jacobs too, like I know a lot has been said about the game script, but when games that the Raiders are playing from behind, I mean, you just brought up a great stat of him and how many times he's targeted 5+ times. He hasn't been that back for the Raiders when they're when they're behind and trying to play catch up. He's a guy that's been on the off the field. He's not on the field getting those catches. I've had this conversation with a lot of people like. It's like, well, he can catch. It's like, sure, of course he can catch. Like it's a running back in the NFL.
He's a professional football player.
Yeah, he can catch. But that's not how the Raiders are using him. So, and there's a reason they brought in Drake. To your point, so you mentioned that running back dead zone. So that's in like Jacobs, Javonte Williams, I suppose, Mike Davis, Gaskin, Hunt, Robinson, Edmonds, in around that range that you said, and you'll have that article that'll come out this week. Is there another running back in that range that you're avoiding?
Yeah, I mean, Mike Davis is in a similar position as far as the dead zone goes. He's not in the same position from the running back 2 is being like drafted very heavily, so he's a little bit of a safer bet, and he has had he has shown that he can catch passes a little bit, but like we kind of know who he is, right? Like he's been around for a while. And yes, he played very well last year and produced for your fantasy teams. I don't know, like I'm not comfortable drafting him in like what is he going, like the 6th round or something?
Yeah.
Like I want like Mike Williams, or I want like Jerry Jeudy or Robbie Anderson. Like I don't want I don't want Mike Davis there. Like it's just that's not how I'm building my teams in general. So like he's never going to be. I would never feel comfortable taking him as my RB1 if I'm going like 0 RB, and then otherwise like I'm just loading up on wide receivers there. Or even like Hawkinson and Andrews are going right around him in some drafts. Like I'd rather go tight end there. So he's just somebody. I don't think I've drafted him once. I think I'm 68 drafts in on Underdog that have been completed so far, and I don't think I have
and not one share.
I don't think
not
I do.
one share.
I might need to draft him once just in case, but yeah, I'm just completely out. These dead zone running backs, like it's just not a safe bet.
And we'll talk about this in the final segment with you. And I'm assuming that you're attacking running backs early, and I think that's the way to go to avoid these dead zone running backs and to draft stud wide receivers. You're really talking to us about Jerry Jeudy, and then Andrews, who I think maybe a month ago, Matt, people were like, nah, I'm not into it. There's a lot maybe now officially going on in Baltimore, Bateman and bringing Sammy, but everyone's hurt now. Like nobody is healthy in that offense, so Andrews is probably not going to see that decline in targets and usage that maybe a lot of people thought he was going to just maybe a couple months ago before or just after the NFL draft. Okay. I'm with you on Davis. I'd like the upside in terms of catching the ball out of the backfield, but typically guys that just have like, I know you said he's been around for a while, but typically guys who had that one solid year was a hot waiver wire pickup. I just cross them off my list usually the next year. I just don't know how they'll return value.
Yeah, like we already missed. If you didn't have him last year, you already missed it.
You missed it. That's it. It's it. If you got it last year, good on you. It's a new year. You already missed it. So backs that you faded, When we return, we're going to talk about backs that you are targeting early in drafts. So keep her locked. Don't go anywhere. Chris Meaney and Matt Jones here on Mean Streets. You're watching on Game Plus Network. I'm a big fan of Matt. It's the first time we've ever been able to talk here. We've chatted back and forth on, our Slack and things like that, setting up drafts. But we're having a great conversation in between commercial breaks here. And just to start mine, so I'm excited to get his thoughts on running backs that he is targeting early and often. Giving you the mic, sir. Running backs, I would assume you're targeting them before the dead zone. You would have some solid running backs. So who are you in on this season?
Yeah, so I think that again, like doing the multiverse series has sort of opened my eyes a little bit to some of these guys that I maybe wasn't like totally in on. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire right now is going sort of at like the 2-3 turn, right? He's around RB14. I think that's probably his floor. Obviously his healthy floor. Jeff Ratcliffe has him right now projected for about 12.6 PPR points per game, which would put him right around RB16. But like there's so much room for him to grow from a touchdown perspective, right? Last year he had one of the biggest workloads with the fewest touchdowns. You put that on the scatter plot. He's due for regression for sure from a touchdown perspective. And there's not really there's not really a ton behind him. Like we're in an era now that we're not going to see a running back get, unless you're James Robinson last year, where you're going to get like 90% of the backfield touches. But for where he's being drafted, he's extremely safe in my opinion. And if you compare him with CMC at the 2-3 turn and then just go just go from there and just hammer wide receivers, for the next like 6 or 7 rounds, I think that's completely absurd. Like I've been getting a lot of Saquon CEH combinations in the Puppy 3 that just opened up. And I've gotten some Eckler CEH. Like I've been really making sure that my exposure is going up on him. And as far as Eckler goes, he's RB7 right now off the board, and I did like very minimal changes in the multiverse to his projection and got him over 300 PPR points to RB2 right behind CMC. I basically bumped him up. Right now, Jeff has him for a 47% rush share and a 15% target share. I just moved him up to 55% rush, which is very reasonable. That's like barely even like top 10 for running backs most of the time, and a 17.5% target share, and it just through the roof. Like I think we're going to look back on drafts at the end of the year and be very shocked that we could get Eckler and CEH in the second round sometimes. I think I think that's going to be one of the things we look back on and we're like, how was that? Like, how were people starting Eckler CEH?
And something that we talked about, and we got to get out of here in like 30 seconds, so I can't really get into it too much. But something that we talked about in the break was just, the fantasy community was totally in on CEH last year. It was Dynasty Pick 101. Everyone wanted this guy, and then there's a bit of a down year for him, I guess. Like, he started off so strong. He was a top 10 running back before they brought in Lev Bell, and had some issues with the injuries and like getting into the red zone, but the offensive line is much better. He's linked to a strong offense, and he's still, the reasons that everyone liked him last year still apply this year. Andy Reid's offense, KC, like they still apply, and the offensive line, like we said, is a little bit better. I think that is an absolute dream start. CMC and then CEH is how I've been trying to, like, when you can pick and choose where you want to draft, I don't mind being at the front there and then having Clyde Edwards. And he almost fell to me, dude, in the flex yesterday, super flex. He went his RB16 near the end of the third. I was almost getting him. I was just like, oh, just wait. Just hopefully people pass and I can grab this guy, and I'd be absolutely thrilled. And for Eckler with Herbert, 7.1 targets per game, and a new coaching staff in there was familiar with, like, the Saints and what they did with all their running backs, catching balls out of the backfield. I think those are both two very, very strong targets, sir. A pleasure to talk to you, man. Enjoy the golf on Friday with your old man. Hopefully the winners are yours, and we'll catch up again soon. Again, follow Matt on Twitter, Matt Jones TFR. Check out all of his great work over at FTN. I got baseball picks here to wrap up the show. Keep her locked. Mean Streets continues here on Game Plus Network. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. A shout out to Matt Jones, some fantastic stuff. I have just made a bet on English. English is now my guy, thanks to Matt Jones. I got a burger bet as well, but check out FTN for all the goods. Of course, FTNbets.com. A couple baseball picks here on the way out. I am going with the Angels with Shohei Ohtani on the bump, a 2.93 ERA, 2 runs or fewer in 5 straight and 9 of 11. He is up against the Detroit Tigers, who have a high strikeout rate, especially against righties. It's cooled off a little bit, but they're still striking out against righties. So give me the Angels on the money line. I really like this Boston and New York game, and I mean, I'm probably not alone here. The total's at 10. I like the over. I like over Andrew Heaney, 5.5 hits, and I like Xander Bogaerts to go deep here at plus 300. But you can really go anywhere with Hunter Renfroe or JD Martinez. For Xander, though, 6 homers, a 313 average against lefties, and a team high 381 WOBA against southpaws. And Heaney has struggled all year. And you go to Yankee Stadium, and you're just going to struggle when you have a 44% fly ball rate. That's what he has. He's allowed 24 bombs in 3 starts with the Yankees in 15 innings. He's issued 15 hits, 15 runs, 8 homers, and 6 walks. 8 homers in his 3 starts with the Yankees. 2 starts at home. He allowed 5 homers and 10 runs, and those 2 starts came against Baltimore and Seattle. Now he has to face with the Boston Red Sox, who are a top 5 offense against southpaw. So I think he is going to struggle. And he faced Boston earlier in the year at Angel Stadium, Spaces Ballpark, and he allowed 6 hits and 3 earned runs. That start came on July 7th. I like the White Sox over 4.5 runs. Cole Irvin on the bump, 8 hits allowed in his last start against Texas. He's got an 82.3% contact rate, which is the highest mark in the league among pitchers with 130 innings, and it's 85% over the last month. Check out ftnbets.com for more. Good luck around the diamond, and we'll be back tomorrow. Have a good one.